nauseating that the government would consider it okay to increase the already staggeringly high salaries of super junior ministers from €124,000 a year to an additional €16,000. How can they possibly justify that when there were nurses who were infected with COVID-19 on the front line who didn't even get sick pay? That's the reality of it. Nurses recruited on the call for Ireland, put on agency contracts, infected with COVID-19 on a fraction of the salary of these junior ministers, didn't even get sick pay when they got infected with COVID-19. And then we have 3 junior ministers think they need an additional €16,000 on top of €124,000. It is unbelievable. And when I challenged Minister O'Donovan about this yesterday and asked him could he please provide an explanation as to how he thought it was justified to give these pay increases to super junior ministers on top of already high salaries, he said we need pay equality around the cabinet table. Now, I think people need to dwell on that fact, because our nurses have been fighting for pay equality for years now, and it has been refused and resisted. So nurses, because they happen to be employed after 2011, have to work alongside other nurses who do the same job and are paid more. That pay inequality exists for them, and the government seems to think that is acceptable for these workers who are actually on the front line fighting to protect our health and our society. But it appears if you're on 124,000 and you're a super junior minister, pay inequality is completely unacceptable. The double standards and hypocrisy of that are shocking beyond belief, and they are an insult to our nurses, our healthcare workers and our frontline workers, and indeed to others in the higher education area where one of these super junior ministers is. If you're a lecturer, you enter if post 2011 you start on less than if it's pre-2011. That's a fact. That pay inequality exists for lecturers in third level education. But it is unacceptable, apparently, for super junior ministers to have to put up with pay inequality. That double standards are absolutely nauseating, Minister. So it's a pity you have tarnished a good bill and a good objective of setting up a new Department of Higher Education and Research with this backdoor attempt to boost up the salary of 3 people who are already extortionately well paid.
Richard Boyd, Deputy Roisin Shortall. The main purpose of the bill before us today is a very positive development. It's something that right across the board we would all agree with, and I think it's really regrettable and ill-judged by the government to slip in this amendment to provide for a pay increase for the super junior ministers. And it's very regrettable that you're dividing the House in the context of this legislation. 128,000 is a very good salary. I think the idea of adding an additional 16,000 plus to that salary is an indication of how out of touch the government is with the mood in the country. It's a real slap in the face for people who've had a really hard time over the last 5 months, people who've lost their livelihoods, lost their income, in some cases their homes being in danger. It's a real slap in the face to the business community who are really struggling to survive, and is an indication of just how out of touch the government is and how insular thinking they are. It contributes to bringing politics into disrepute, in my view, and is a breach of trust with the public in circumstances where people have in the main been pulling together over the last 5 months. I think it's a really serious error to make. And even at this late stage, Minister, I would appeal to you to think better of this move. It is wrong. I think you would accept in your own heart that it's wrong to do this. There is no justification for an increase of €16,000 for people who are already very well paid. And I'd make a very strong appeal to you not to divide the House on this matter and to withdraw this section of the bill.
Thank you, Deputy. Two speakers left at this point. Minister Harris.
Thank you very much. Of course, this is about ensuring that the situation enables the government to allow anybody who's entitled to the allowance already on the virtue of attending Cabinet as a Minister of State draw down that allowance. And that's what this is about. There's a real stench of hypocrisy, though, from some speakers in this House, because Deputy Doherty stood up and argued that ministers should be reducing their salaries. But of course, Sinn Féin ministers, remember where you are in government now, in Northern Ireland, accepted a pay increase in April during the height of the pandemic. Your pay went up. So I presume Sinn Féin ministers will be marching into Stormont on Monday, and I presume you'll be rushing through legislation because you want to reduce the pay of ministers. Of course, Sinn Féin MLAs, when they didn't turn up for work from January 2017 to October 2019, claimed €4.7 million in a closed parliament. Of course, in 2014, BBC Spotlight investigated and reported over a 10-year period that Sinn Féin MLAs claimed £700,000 sterling for Research Services Ireland. This was a company run by two persons, also in charge of Sinn Féin's finance department in Northern Ireland. And BBC Spotlight, in their investigation, wasn't able to find any evidence whatsoever of any research being carried out. And one Sinn Féin MLA, I'm sure they got in trouble for this, but they said they'd never even heard of the company until it turned up on their expenses. And when you talk about equality, the Sinn Féin chief whip in this House receives an allowance almost twice that of the allowance paid to the whip for the Greens, Labour, Social Democrats and Solidarity People Before Profit. So I'm sure this won't make your Twitter video, but let's at least be honest. Let's at least not be hypocritical. This is a piece of legislation to set up a new department, and within that legislation, the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform has asked that anybody who attends Cabinet as a Minister of State, as a super junior minister, that the arbitrary figure of 2 is no longer there, and therefore that others can draw down allowances. So you can use it to slur government if you wish. It's very clear, the objective here, and unfortunately you've been silent on all of the inconsistent stances that your MLAs, your elected representatives and your ministers adopt in Northern Ireland.
Minister.
Look, I'm not going to take time to respond to the Minister. Barrett, the Minister should be better briefed, especially in his department. He would know that all 5 parties actually oppose the increases of £1,000 sterling to MLAs and asked for it to be deferred. No Minister, no party of any political hue actually passed legislation to increase salaries in the North. What they actually said, including Michelle O'Neill, called it scandalous, outrageous, said it shouldn't happen in the middle of a pandemic. What you're saying is your junior ministers, what you're saying is your junior ministers on 124,000 need extra 16,000. You're asking us to change the law of this state to allow for that to happen. Maybe we'll have a wee whip around later on if we get Michael Healy-Rae's cap and help the poor ministers out, that they can't survive on €124,000. That's the reality of it. This is you asking this House to change the law so that legislatively you can increase the salary for a junior minister because he or she has the privilege to sit at the cabinet table, and for that effort and that alone, with no other responsibilities, they should get an extra €16,000. As the proposer of this motion, Yaskin Corlia, I ask that we move this to a vote.
This will be the last speaker, so we're going before him. But look, I think that a lot has been said about this bill by every other speaker here today, and I just wanted to add my voice to that. And Minister, you have your beef with Sinn Féin and you can outline whatever your concerns are with Sinn Féin, but that does not take from the fact that what you're doing here in this bill is completely wrong. And let's see you get up and attack us and attack the Social Democrats and attack everybody else and hear that says that this is wrong and this shouldn't be happening. And if ministers are attending the Cabinet, well, then it should be an honour for them to attend Cabinet and actually be there and actually participate in running this country. In this country of ours, and that should be what it's about, because there's no doubt that we are all extremely well paid in this House, all of us, and that should be enough for any of us to have a say and to be actually sitting there and participating in how this country is run. And I think it's a sad reflection, and you can have your bickering across the floor between yourselves or whatever you want to do, but it's a sad reflection on you and your government that you're bringing this forward in this way. And basically what it is because there's the three parties of you there now, so you have to have 3 junior ministers who have to get super junior wages, and that's what this is all about, and that's the bottom line. It's not about anything else. It's about facilitating your 3-party system, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay. It's just difficult to see, and I hope I didn't miss any Teach the Dála putting their hand up. So Deputy Doherty, you indicated you wanted to speak again.
Marion Harkin.
Marion Harkin, I beg your pardon. Thank you.
Thank you, Can Corla. Just very briefly, it, I suppose, came to my notice late in the day that this aspect to the bill had been slipped in, because I would have been very supportive of the bill, because it's an important bill to set up this new department and the new minister, etc. But to be honest with you, I really am flabbergasted that the government would put this forward and would look for an increase of €16,288 for each of these new ministers. Because if you divide that by 52, you get a figure of €313 per week. And that's an increase. That's not a lot more than what the PUP payment is. And it's a great deal more than what a carer's allowance is. So this is an increase. And I just think it's such a negative message to people, because really what's being said here is we can do this and we will. And I'm really surprised that the government, all of the parties in it, would allow such a negative message to go out in the middle of a pandemic to look for an increase in salaries. Now, in my role as TD, regularly I come across people, ordinary people, who say to me they're applying for perhaps different social welfare payments or different payments, but they are €5 over the limit, €10 over the limit, etc. I know a lot of people, for example, are waiting anxiously around the new limits for the medical card. But once somebody is over, they're over, and that's it. Whether it's €1 or €100, it's a red line. And those people will look at this here today, and they'll even wonder how a government could do this to their own image. And I suppose the final point I'll make is, I hear the talk about pay equality, and that's a legitimate argument. But we have pay inequality already. I remember in the European Parliament trying to bring to the attention of the Commission the fact that younger teachers, I think, who started in 2011, I don't remember the exact detail, but they were paid less, like was it 211 or 212? They were paid less than their colleagues. And I tried to bring this up from the perspective of pay equality, but I was unable to, because I could have no success with it. And while I know the government is moving to close that gap still remains, and it was there for many years. Section 39 workers are another group who suffer under the issue of pay inequality. And as far as I understand, and I hope I'm wrong, there is no move there to bring up their salaries. So I just want to say that my objective is not to slur the government. I'm just really astonished that they're doing it, to be honest. So I don't want to slur them. I just want to represent the views. I've got a couple of phone calls from different people who are just shocked that this is happening. And they're saying, how can this be happening? And it's really, that's what I want to reflect here today. And my own sense is the same. In my view, for what it's worth, this leaves a sour taste. And you know something? It's not worth it.